Hi guys, so this is Anti-Flame, and I'm here with another Study the Spire video. This one's going to be talking all about how to set your game up in a favourable manner so you can speedrun and try and compete with myself and some of the others at the top of the leaderboards. There's a few things I think that a lot of people overlook, and I'm aiming to cover that in this video. And as you can see just below me, there's four things I'm focusing on in this video. This video isn't going to cover any in-game tactics. It's simply going to cover the setup process to set up a file for speedrunning, and so you guys can access exactly the same the manner of speedrunning that we do, so that there's full transparency. We're not trying to hide anything from you guys. If you go on the Slay the Spire Discord, that information is already readily available, but I'm putting it here in video form so you guys can access it and understand exactly how to set it up, because I actually myself had quite a few troubles with it, as I'm sure a few of you have seen on stream. But I've since set it up, no problem. It turns out there was an issue that I will be able to show you guys in just a little bit that I overlooked as someone who doesn't know how to write scripts whatsoever. But there's four things I'm going to focus on. The first one is your in-game settings. The second one is the save file setup. That's probably what a lot of you are here for. The third one will be a few external things, nothing completely game-changing that you can't do on your own, but I feel like they need to be covered. And the final one is actually just quite a simple one. It's the state of mind you need to be in to speedrun. That may sound a bit sort of vague, but you'll understand what I mean when I get to it. Anyway, we're going to go down the list. So first of all, there's the in-game settings. A lot of people are aware of these kind of things, but I need to cover it regardless, because I want you guys to just be, completely understanding of exactly what you need to do and how you need to set your game up to be able to see what we see. So if you look now, there we go. You should be able to see my in-game menu, the game settings menu. Just you can take a moment and pause the video if you want to sort of mimic these settings. I've muted the game for this video, but there are a few things that are important to note here. The first one is, your hardware will help for sure, but just as long as this isn't an intensive game, as long as you have yourself set to 240 frames per second here, as opposed to 60, which a lot of people get put themselves on, then you'll be noticing a big increase in the speed of certain cards and how they play out. First of all, Whirlwind, probably the single best card for speedrunning, actually ticks faster. All the damage ticks will tick faster if you have a higher frame rate, and if your monitor if your monitor can display that, then all the better. I believe even if it doesn't display better than 60 frames per second, having a higher frame rate and having it not dip at any points will essentially speed up your game ever so slightly. I play on full screen. You don't have to. There's no specific reason to necessarily. I do it because I have two monitors, and sometimes my mouse will pass over onto the other monitor if I'm not playing on true full screen. But if borderless full screen works for you, or you want to play in windowed mode, that's absolutely fine too. I would recommend disabling screen shake, because it just adds additional animations that blur your vision slightly, and it's just not necessary. And make sure that VSync is turned off. If it's not turned off, your frame rate will be capped at 60 or capped at whatever your monitor can display, and that will mean that you're not hitting the 240 frames per second that the max frame rate can hit. Beyond that, the obvious one, make sure you've got fast mode turned on. You'll know very quickly if you do or not, because the game will play out about twice as fast, if not more so, when you're using fast mode. I also disable the confirmation when choosing one card, but that doesn't come into play very often as the ironclad. You'll often notice that it will come into play as the silent when you're discarding a card. If you only have one card left in your hand and you're choosing to discard a card, that's when that will come into play, and it'll do it automatically for you. So if you're planning on speedrunning the silent, definitely have that ticked. The ironclad, it comes up very rarely, but it's better safe than sorry. And I just disable my damage numbers because I know I've played the game enough to sort of understand how much damage I'm doing. So make sure you've got those settings set up. But before you go and set them up in your game, if you're planning on speedrunning in the same way that we do in any percent, you'll have to do a thing which we've described as a save file setup. This was introduced and just sort of discovered by Forgotten Arbiter. He's the guy I've been competing with for the world record quite regularly, and he discovered this because of a certain setting that's in the preferences file, which means that you can essentially tee up what is a perfect speedrun file. The main advantages to this, and I'm going to quickly close the game, the main advantages to setting up this kind of file are that I'd say it's two or threefold. First of all, it allows you to have a more condensed relic and card pool, because you only unlock 3 cards out of the total, I believe it's 9, that you can unlock as the Ironclad, and all the 6 cards that you don't unlock are all pretty bad, whereas the 3 unlock, 2 are pretty good for speedrunning, Heavy Blade and Limit Break. But you also don't unlock quite a few relics, because if you play through as the Ironclad and as the Silent, they each unlock, I believe it's 6 or 9 relics apiece. So that's a total of, I think it's 15 or 18 relics, none of which are game-breakingly good for speedrunning. There's 1 or 2 you kind of do miss a little bit, but the trade-off is far worth it because of the next point. And that's to say that if you set up your save file in exactly the way that I'm going to explain out, that was discovered by Forgotten Arbiter and has been shared all over the Slay the Spire Discord, which I recommend you check out anyway, because it's super populated. The devs are on there; they're really great guys, and there's just a really good budding community, not just in the speedrunning, but also just surrounding the whole game. So I say check that out first of all. But the biggest benefit is that you're guaranteed to face 3 specific bosses. The 3 bosses that you want to face, and this is preferable for speedrunning, are the Ooze. I can't remember his thing, it's the Ooze King, but I'm not 100% sure on his name, on the first floor. You'll then face the Collector on the second floor, and on the third floor, you'll face Decker and Donu. For obvious enough reasons, when you're trying to speedrun, the optimal build is a whirlwind strength build that relies on AoEing every single enemy on screen, usually applying vulnerable, so you're just dealing that additional damage, but piling up your strength with offerings and flexes and all the other tools that you can find to essentially create like a 1 or 2 turn kill with a whirlwind with about 8 or 10 energy on a bunch of enemies. And it means that most encounters, if you draw well, will be completed in 1 turn. And that's the dream. That's the idea of the setup. And those 3 bosses are the best bosses for doing so. It's a combination of having lowest health totals, being weak against AoE in the Ooze's case and in Decker and Donu's case, and the Collector is just essentially not as strong a boss as the Champ or as I think it's the Bronze Automaton. They're just a little bit tougher to deal with, and the Champ has a bigger health pool. But I'm not here to talk about what it achieves, although it helps so you know why you're setting this up, but how to set this up. So I'm going to show this in my default Steam folder. So what you're going to need to do, you can set this up offline. All you need to do, if you're going to do that and set it up offline, is create a new folder, pull the desktop-1.0.jar file, create a copy of that and copy it into a new file where you then follow all the steps I'm about to give. So you'll have a file which just has desktop 1.0.jar in, and then you'll follow exactly the same steps as I do. And I think you need to pull over the JRE file as well, so create a copy of that if you're doing an offline setup. But I'm going to show you what I do, which is to set it up in the Steam file, and that lets you bring your save directly online. It means that every time you finish a run, you'll deal damage to the heart, and if you achieve any scores, they'll appear on the scoreboards. That's the main reason I do it. I'm a bit of a I focus very much on the scoreboards, even though they're currently not fully accurate and people seem to be able to manipulate it. It's still nice to get your name up there and see the others that are doing the same. What this will do, however, is mean that your normal save file, the one with all of your achievements and your ascension runs, you'll need to back that up if you want to keep them. I stupidly didn't keep them, so whenever I actually want to do ascensions in the future, I'm going to have to completely play through and unlock everything again. But for you guys, if you are at that point already where you have your ascension runs and you really don't want to lose your data, back it up. That means to take a copy of, I would say, preferences, runs, send to devs, and saves. Saves isn't in here, as this is a demo setup. But make sure that you take copies of that, and if you're even more paranoid, just take a copy of the entire Slay the Spire folder before you go around messing with it. I don't want people coming and crying to me saying, you know, they've lost all their achievements and they have to start Ascension from Ascension 1 again because they followed this guide. This guide is for speedrunning, specifically even speedrunning the Ironclad. I believe, I can't confirm because I'm not a silent speedrunner as of yet, but I believe the Silent actually has a slightly different setup, which is favourable for her. But we're not, you know, to clarify, what we're doing here is not editing any in-game files. We set this up entirely naturally, and then what we do is we create a small script that will essentially reload a save point, where that save point establishes the bosses that you're going to face, the fact that you're only level 1 as the Ironclad, and therefore have the, as I said, the concentrated pool of relics and cards. But nothing else. That's all it tees up. The seed that you'll generate when you run the game and run the single run that you run before you have to reset will be entirely random. You know, there's no fixing of files in there, because that would invalidate your, you know, any sort of speed run that you try and attempt in an any % setup. That is the cardinal no in terms of rules. You do not manipulate the in-game files. Everything you achieve has to be done manually, and this setup was discovered by, like I said, by Forgotten Arbiter, who is also on YouTube, so I suggest you go check him out. But anyway, that's enough conjecture and rambling. Let's get involved in this. So what you need to do, I haven't actually done this setup just here, is to delete your preferences, runs, saves, and send to devs. Now, I'll say it one more time. Back up your file if you want to keep it, but I'm not trying to keep it because this is, you know, already my speedrun setup. So you want to delete those 3 files. At that point, you've essentially refreshed your game. You've reset your game, and when you boot up slaythespire.exe, either through Steam or through this very folder, you will be booting up a fresh install of the game. I'm not going to show you the full steps I'm going to have to run through because it requires a couple of full run-throughs of the game, but I'll explain out exactly what you need to do. So at this point, the game's just booting up because it takes a little while. What you'll have to do, the 3 things I'll say you have to do. There's 2 steps you have to take. Obviously, first of all, enter your name. This will be called Anti-Flames YouTube. Okay, yeah, that'll be fine. Anti-Flames YouTube with a capital L as well, because I'm, you know, really clever. So what we'll do is you have to go play mode, standard, and you'll notice that everything is locked up again. You know, the Ironclad is level 0. The Silent doesn't even exist. You know, she's still locked away here. And what you need to do is simply embark. You don't need to do this in any sort of rushed way. You simply start up a game. Oh, before you even do that, in fact, go to your settings. This is the point where you want to set up the settings to be exactly what you want. So in my case, you know, and in your case as well, as you may be able to hear the game, I'm not sure actually, is to obviously change your sound settings to whatever you want. You want to, I disable uploading game data. I don't think it has any impact on speed, but I'm not sure, so I do it anyway. Bit paranoid, but, you know, sue me. You know, so I set up my setup exactly as I want it. I have my 240 frames per second. I obviously want to disable VSync, and you know, it might ask you to restart the game at that point. But I've got my setup exactly how I want it now. And make sure you do that before you do any of this. So once you've done that, you boot up a run and start to run up as the Ironclad. What you need to do, and like I said, you don't need to do this in any sort of speedrun fashion, you can take your time to make sure that you succeed, is to complete a full run as the Ironclad. I'd suggest not getting too much experience, as you may tick over 2 levels if you take a load of fights and try and get a really high score. But you want to tick over at least 1 level, and if you complete the game, which you need to, you'll tick over at least 1 level. And that will unlock Limit Break, Heavy Blade, and I believe Spot Weakness. Spot Weakness isn't that great for speedrunning, but it's not terrible either, and the other 2 cards are more than worth it. So you want to dilute the pool just that little bit to get those good cards in there. So when you go through this speedrun, this is really important to note, because your save file will be set up in this way from now on, once you finish your setup, is you need to go through all the tutorial tips. These ones will be easy to go through, but there'll be a few you might forget about. There's some about the deck ending and refreshing, that should come up normally. Potions, powers being found, skills being found. But a couple of ones that people miss out, for example, is here. When you try and spend energy that you don't have. That is something you will do a lot in speedrunning. It's something I do a lot in speedrunning. If you don't trigger this tip, you'll get it in your save file and it will cost you 2 or 3 seconds every run, and that is not worth it. So you just want to do that and end turn, and you want to play through the entire game. I'm not going to play through a full run here, but I am going to show you another tip that comes up. You get no more cards and so on and so forth. But there is another important tip you need to make sure that you disable, which is this. So the potions is this. Instead of taking a card, if you skip a card and you hit skip here, it will give you a warning about don't forget your rewards. Again, in speedrunning, you're going to be skipping a lot of cards, so make sure you trigger that tip at least once during your run. I'm sure most of you will, but some of you will be trying to take everything as a as a bit of a joke and see if you can run through, and it'll end up biting you in the ass. So at this point, you do your full run, you clear all 3 bosses, and you get to the heart and you stab it and whatnot, and then come back to the main menu. So at that point, you want to come back to the menu. I'm just going to abandon this run. And I unlock the silent, which is important. So at the end of your first run, you'll unlock the silent. What you need to do at this point in time is to go to the silent and do a run with the silent. Now this run, you do not fully complete. What you need to do, however, and this is to set up the boss states, is to complete the first floor, complete the second floor, and when you reach the third floor, after killing the second boss and taking your relics and whatnot, you'll come to the map of the third floor. At that point, once you've hit the map of the third floor and you've seen the boss that appears at the top, you can end your run. You can end your run, and you should end your run. You should abandon the run at that point. This is because, and this is the way the game functions, I believe, it's not my full understanding of it, I don't have a comprehensive knowledge of exactly why it works this way, is because when you first start playing the game and you have all the tutorials, the game ensures that you face every boss at least once before it starts getting randomized. Because we have this knowledge, it allows us to set the game up so that the bosses we haven't faced, there'll be 4 of them, but you'll always see the same 3, are Ooze, Collector, and Decker and Donu. You also won't have faced Time Eater, because in your Ironclad run you'll face the Awakened one. It's not too important to know that, but I figured I'd share it as to sort of have an understanding as to why it works that way. But once you've completed or got to the third floor on your silent run and ended the game, at that point, you can quit the game. You don't continue on at that point. So you quit the game. You'll now see in that file, or in that folder, sorry, there are four new folders that have been generated. That's Preferences, Runs, Saves, and Send to Devs. Now at this point, you want to create a copy of those. So I'm going to do it in this folder. And I have some that I've prepared earlier, so I will be doing some of that. But you want to call it, in this case, we've nicknamed it, or Arbiter nicknamed it Donut Prefs, because you get Decker and Donu at the end of it all. Create a folder called Donut Prefs, and what you want to do is create a copy, or you can just drag it in, but I'll create a copy of it. A copy of your Preferences folder in here. In fact, not your Preferences folder, but all the files. So you want to take all of these, excuse me, I've only done this once before, so you want to create a folder that looks like this called Donut Prefs, and it must be within your Slay the Spire folder. Again, if you're doing an offline version, you can set it up there. At this point, you're almost ready to go. You just need to set up a simple script to run, to essentially replace the files in the Preferences with the ones in Donut Prefs. Every time you complete a run or you end a run, you will need to restart the game. That is one of the annoying parts of it, but it's fair enough. It's worth it for the benefit that we receive here. Additionally, because the last run you completed with the Ironclad was a completed run, or reached the first boss at least, you will get Niao's Blessing every single time you start a run. And this is important because previously we had to run to the first boss just to get Niao's Blessing on the subsequent run. So this saves a lot of time when you're trying to speedrun effectively. Once you've created Donut Prefs, you need to create a text file in this folder. Now I'm going to go ahead and just open up the text file here, and it is the one called, these are both the same, it is the one called resetsave.txt, and I've saved it elsewhere. I'm going to copy it across, but what you need to make sure, excuse me, that I'm trying to make sure that you guys can see it on screen, it's not being covered up by any of this stuff over here, down here, is you need to copy this block of text, but don't just copy it. You see where it says path to? Replace that with the path to the folder that you're using. So in my case, the path would be, C, Program Files 86, Steam Apps Common, Slay the Spire. and then saves. Obviously, so make sure it goes to the right file, and additionally make sure that this what's it called, the directory is the correct directory. So for me, it would be the C drive, and it would stack up in that way. It would say program files 86, Steam, Steam apps, common, Slay the Spire, saves. Additionally, you obviously do these with all the other ones in here, and you must make sure that these two are on the same line. So the robocopy line has to have the donut prefs and the preferences included. The other thing to note, don't include this line of text in your final file, but the other thing to include is that if there's a space in the file path, this is the mistake that I made. If there is a space in the file path, make sure that you are including a set of quotation marks around the entire file path. This is because if there are spaces in the file path, the script will assume that it's a new, I don't know the exact term, but like a new argument or a new condition, and it won't work. It just simply won't work. So make sure you include quotations around if there is a space in it. In my case, the space was in program files 86. There's obviously a space in that. I didn't know what I was doing, so I had to ask for help on that one, and I was helped out very much by another person in the community called Fresher Denim All. Go check them out as well. They're learning to speedrun at the moment, and they help me out a lot, and actually improve my understanding of how basic scripts work. It may sound pretty inane to any of you who know how to script and write scripts and program things, but to me, I'm sitting here with no knowledge of it all, and I was able to set this up no problem. So to give you context, I will take my version, the one which has the correct file paths, which I've stashed away just here in Slay the Spire backups, and I'm going to have to replace this donut prefs because it's not the correct one. We'll replace donut prefs, but we'll add in my version of donut prefs, and we'll also add in my one called save reset, which is the one with the correct information for me. At this point in time, I believe, I haven't tested this yet, so this could go really poorly for a video, but we'll test. I should be able to hit save reset. It'll quickly run the script in command prompt, and touch wood, we'll be seeing the game boot up in about 5 to 10 seconds because it takes a while, with my save state set up and ready to go. So there's the game, and you'll see here that we're no longer being asked to set up a new name or anything. It's got my normal preference name, and it will also actually have your game settings that you set up already lined up for you. So these are my normal settings. I usually have a bit of volume, which I had obviously set up previously for the video to have no sound. But it's got everything exactly the way I like it, and that'll happen every time. That's part of the preferences folder. So at this point, I'm able to do a complete run, and you'll see if I boot this up, Niao's will be here. Niao will be here, and I'll get my offers. I'll be able to take my Niao's offering and start my run off, and continue on. You'll notice that the first boss is indeed the Ooze, and if I was to play this through, the second boss would be the Collector, and the third boss would be Decker and Donu. That is incredibly crucial for speedrunning, as previously, you were able to hit those 3 bosses at once, but you had a 1 in 27 chance of doing so. And when they're the preferable bosses and you're able to get them, what setting this up allows us to do, completely fairly, is face the optimal bosses while still having the RNG of the run, the RNG of the relics, the RNG of everything else, but the fact that the bosses would sometimes just completely kill runs. That's sort of the line we've drawn, especially as you're able to set it up naturally. So once you've got this all set up, you're ready to go. All you need to note is that when you finish a run, either by skipping out, I use Alt F4 because it immediately jumps you out of the game. All you need to make sure that you do is that you have this backed up somewhere else in case anything has changed when an update comes along. Just have it backed up in a folder tucked away somewhere else that you remember where it is, that isn't the folder that you've set the game up in. And all you need to do is click the save reset.bat or whatever you want to call it, because you need to set that's one thing I didn't mention, is to turn the text file, the notepad file, into a .bat file or a .cmd file. And what it will do is it will run it whenever it'll run it in command prompt whenever you click on it. So what I'm able to do here is simply double click on this, and it will run it again, and it will reset it ready for the next run. If you don't do that between runs, so if you finish a run and then you start one up again immediately, you have no guarantee of either having Niao's or having the specific bosses teed up in the correct order. So again, I'm just as another bit of proof. I run it again, boot the game up. You'll have an offering of Niaos. It'll be different, as you note. There's no Niaos. What's we call it? Niaos offering. Niaos Lament, excuse me. And so I can pick my random boss relic and continue a completely different route up again with the same boss. And that's pretty much how to set it up. That's the online version. A lot of people prefer to play it in an offline file, and I don't blame them. I just prefer to do it this way. It does make a bit of it a bit tedious for those of you who want to have Ascension files as well. I don't really care about it, but I might change my mind in that in the future. And in that case, what you need to do is make sure that you are able to basically replace and restore the backed up copy of the game that you had. Essentially that's preferences, runs, saves, and sent to devs. Those are the ones to be safe with. But you can, you just be careful when you're messing around with files. But create a backup and restore it, and you'll be able to continue on your progress from where you were before. Now that is essentially the biggest tip I can give any of you in terms of setting up your Slay the Spire speedrunning say career, your aims there. It's pretty simple to do. It just takes a little bit of finagling and setting up a script, and obviously having to complete that ironclad run into the silent run that you almost finish. But that is how you set that up. Again, I want to give credit once more to Forgotten Arbiter who found this and shared it with us all, so we can all play on a level playing field. And a few others in the community on the Slay the Spire Discord that have been helping share it to everyone. And that's the second one. That's probably what most of you are here for. So if that's all you needed, go on, get out there and start beating our times and giving us that competition, that drive to continue, lowering that record bit by bit. And even if you're not competing at the record level, if you're competing at, to get yourself under that PB, to get that first run you ever get under 8 minutes or 7 minutes or whatever the benchmark you're trying to set, don't be discouraged, because there are other people out there like you who are trying to do exactly the same thing. And it's only with that competition will they be driven forward to keep trying and get down to where we are. My first run I ever submitted on speedrun.com was a 15-minute run, and it was world number 5 at the time. That was about 5 or 6 weeks ago. So be very aware that this is moving at an incredible speed, and all these extra sort of tools and tips that we're discovering are incredibly helpful. And we have a small but devout sort of community and following, and I just want you guys to be use that to the best of your ability, and to really try and push the community forward in that regard, because we have a lot of we have a lot of people watching us essentially, and I want everyone to be respectful in that regard, and treat each other with respect, and have fun whilst we do this, because I do this because it's fun, not because it's I'm not trying to profit off of anything here. It's just enjoyable. Now that being said, that is that setup. There are 2 other points, as I said. There are external things that you should set up, and we'll dive into that now. The first one of those things is your live split, your timer. Essentially, timers are quite crucial in speedrunning, no doubt. And although there is an in-game timer, there is a discrepancy between that and the real time it actually takes to complete a run, and it is a bit variable depending on people's machines and whatnot. So currently, the community is backing the real-time attack score. That's what a real time for a speedrun is known as, an RTA, and that's what we're generally running with right now. But and the best way to do that is live split. Now you can see down here I have live split. For some reason the icon doesn't come up for me, and you just want to boot that up. Obviously, I run it in admin mode, so it appears on top of things, and you'll see it pop up right here, which I'll drag it out into the open. Now usually I keep this off the monitor that I'm playing on, because it doesn't seem to pop over a true full screen version of the game, and that's fine. On stream it will come up and you guys can see it, and I just have it in the corner of my eye over here as opposed to on the screen, because it's a bit distracting seeing the number constantly ticking. But if you want to check it, you should be able to. That being said, this is an app that you can download on speedrun.com. If you Google live split, literally the word live split, you'll find, I believe the top link will be github.io which links directly to this download, and it is very straightforward. It takes a bit of setup and a bit of getting used to, and a bit of key binding setup for what the hotkeys you should use for timing yourself and using splits should be. But there are great video guides out on that already, and I'm not going to delve into that. I believe there's even one on the LiveSplit website, and if not, just Google or YouTube. I think that just search for LiveSplit setup, because when you first open it, you'll probably notice you have about 20 different splits set up, and you probably don't want that for running Slay the Spire. But you might need it for other games if you choose to start speedrunning other games. So it's almost a good tutorial just to learn to use LiveSplit if you're planning on speedrunning things in the future. I'm not going to delve much more into LiveSplit on that. That's something you guys can do in your own time, but I'm going to close that up. The other thing externally that you should really try and set up is your key bindings. So I believe the devs are working on internal key bindings. It's in the settings, it's next to settings. There is a coming soon banner on it. And obviously they're working hard on lots of different aspects of the game, so they haven't pegged the timeline on that. We don't know when that'll be available, but when it is available, this point will be somewhat moot. But until that time, you should use the key bindings. In speedrunning, the two key bindings you need to worry about or care about are E for ending your turn and M for sort of pulling out to the map. There's plenty of points in which you can map out. If you watch our speedruns, you'll notice many points which we do it. Most notably, probably at fireplaces, when you either upgrade a card, there's a certain point after the animation that you can jump out a bit early instead of having to click the continue button. Or if you choose to rest at a fireplace, almost as soon as you rest, you can skip out. The map will be clouded, but sometimes you can click where you need to go and skip out 2 or 3 seconds of waiting, if not more. So there's plenty of time to be saved on using hotkeys. Ending your turn is obviously a big one, because you're as soon as you've played out the cards you want to play out, you hit that E, and the opponents will take their turn almost immediately, or as soon as the animations are finished. What I do, my setup, to give you context on this, is that I rebind my M, because E and M are quite far apart, and you'll find yourself getting, over a long play session, you might find yourself cramping up a bit, and it's much better to have it, in an easy place which you're used to pressing. So for someone who plays a lot of first-person shooters, or used to, as well as League of Legends and Diablo and so on and so forth, I choose to rebind M to the letter Q. So I have Q and E, E ending my turn, Q mapping me out to things, and those are pretty crucial keys to use. Additionally, I have my hotkeys for my timers set to 1 and 3, 1 being to start a run and to split a run, 3 being to reset. This might seem a bit inane, this minutiae, but trust me when I say you'll prefer using rebound keys that are close to each other over a 3 or 4 hour session of speedrunning, as opposed to stretching your hand across the keyboard the entire time and eventually sort of getting hand cramps or getting repetitive strain injury, or carpal tunnel syndrome. It's very painful for a lot of people, and if you can rebind it, that really helps you out. In my case, I use my keyboard software. I have a Razer keyboard, so I use Razer Synapse. They have a brilliant sort of plethora of ways to customize your keyboard, and one of them is to rebind keys. And I use that. However, a lot of you won't have software for your keyboard that automatically is sort of built in. So the one I would recommend, I believe, I'm going to have to look it up here briefly. The key binding is Auto Hotkey. I've used Auto Hotkey before. I used it years back when I didn't have a keyboard like this. I can't remember what I was using it for, but essentially you can rebind keys pretty much on the fly with that tool. I believe it's autohotkey.com. I'll put a link in the description to all of these things that I've referenced. So you guys can go and check out these things immediately and not have to bother searching them for yourself, perhaps. So AutoHotkey is the one that I would recommend, but there are plenty of others out there, and as long as it lets you rebind keys and doesn't interfere with your CPU or your GPU, then you're good to go. Rebind them exactly how you want as well. Don't take my sort of Q and E combo as the be all and end all of bindings. You guys might find that you want to rebind it however you want. You might want it on arrow keys or on spacebar. Do what makes you feel happy. I'm not there to dictate exactly how you choose to rebind it, but I recommend doing so. And that's that point. The final point I have is the mentality that you go into when diving into speedrunning. You need to, speedrunning is not an easy task. I know this, I'm not trying to make myself sound like some sort of martyr here. I'm not a martyr. I'm simply a guy who sits in front of a camera and plays video games, in my free time. I thoroughly enjoy it, and I thoroughly enjoy the challenge of speedrunning. A lot of it's dictated by RNG, however, and that is what a lot of people will get hung up on. You need to be able to separate yourself from that. You need to be able to separate yourself from the fact that sometimes RNG will screw you over. Sometimes you'll be having that perfect run. You'll have the, your Juzu beads. You'll have your 2 energy relics. You'll have had your minute-and-a-half first floor, and you'll be flying through and wondering, is this it? Is this my personal best? Is this going to challenge the world record? And then you'll get 2 or 3 horrible encounters, and you spend a minute and a half on one encounter, and that just kills the run outright. But maybe you can still get that PB, and then you just get another unfortunate roll on a different fight, and you don't draw the card that you need, and the run ends then and there. And that can be a real bummer. It will bum you out. It bums me out all the time. But you need to learn to separate that from those highs. Separate the lows from the actual playing of the game. It'll happen. Sometimes you'll run 30 runs and they'll end at Neows because you'll be offered garbage, and you'll re-roll the boss relic and you'll get garbage, and you'll just have to sort of suck it up, and that'll be 15 minutes or however long it takes, spent just clicking once and clicking again and reloading the game. But speedrunning isn't easy. It isn't super difficult to get into it. It is a challenge to improve your score after you get to a certain point. But you need to be in the right frame of mind. So that's just a point to consider, guys, that take breaks when you're playing over long periods of time. I don't do it enough, often because I'm on stream. And if you guys are on stream, I would still recommend taking more breaks than I do, because I sit there for far too long at a time, not taking long enough breaks where, you're staring at a long distance away, so you don't sort of melt your eyes, essentially. But that's, essentially just treat yourself fairly when it comes to the game. Don't get too hung up on the losses. Enjoy the highs, but just don't dwell on the lows too much, because it will get you down. And just have fun with it. Treat it as a competitive enjoyment that isn't sort of a negative competitivity. So if you're competing with your best friend or someone else on the leaderboards for that, getting in the top 10 or the top 5, or even competing with me for the top couple of spots, don't let that sort of get you down when you don't quite make it, because just remember that that competition drives each other on, and we have a really positive community here, and I want that to continue. I guess I'm a spokesperson for the Slay the Spire speedrunning community, and we've got this small but wonderful following, and let's not ruin that. Okay, if you see someone being negative, call them out on it. Negative in a way that sort of is to the detriment of others. Then call them out on it. If they're a bit bummed out because their run didn't go so well, or they just missed out on that PB, pull them up, help them up, and make them feel better about themselves. Because without that sort of positivity, I know this sounds, a lot of people will call me, just really stupid for just repeating this point, but it does bear repeating. Just make sure that everyone around you in this community is feeling as good as you are, and if you're not feeling great, the people in the community are there to help as well. But that's it, guys. I don't want to dwell on this too much. I think this video has already run much longer than I expected, but take on board these tips. Settings, the save file setup, the key bindings, and live split as well. Again, check in the description for links to all of that kind of stuff. And finally, up here, make sure that your mind is focused. But if you're not feeling it, don't burn yourself out in this game. Video games are great, but if you play them too much, you will burn out, and you'll feel really bad about it. You'll get salty, and it'll ruin the experience for yourself. But that's about it, guys. I've been Anti-Flame. I still am Anti-Flame, I suppose. Yeah, that's my setup. That's my speedrunning 101. If you've liked the video, consider following on Twitch, as I will stream there. I try to stream 2 to 3 times a week, sometimes more if I'm feeling up to it. I think this week I'm going to be streaming 4 times. And and subscribing on YouTube if that's your bag. I'll be back, I believe, next week with I'm aiming to do a card review video, but don't hold me to that, even though I've said it in a video and put it online. Shit. Don't hold me to that. But I am aiming to put out a sort of card review video. It'll be similar in vein to the Relic review, but a bit more binary, I think, as cards are usually either, unlike relics, which can have some minor uses, cards are either useful or not useful in 90% of cases. And I think it does bear repeating, and I don't think it's as in depth as the relic review. But we'll see how that goes. If you guys, like I said, if you enjoy the video, follow in all those sort of weird ways I've already described. And until next time, guys, peace out, and don't forget to love each other.